Today I'm going to be talking about the Neo Geo X, which is a handheld made by Tomo and released in the UK by Blaze and sold by Funstock. It's officially licensed by SNK, as you can see up here. It's been out a little while. I think it came out just before Christmas last year, although they had some supply chain issues, meaning that a lot of people who pre-ordered them for Christmas, like myself, only got them in sort of just after Christmas or early January. This is not breaking news. I'm sure if you have any interest in the system already, you've probably seen a number of reviews of this or read some online. There's a huge thread over on neogeo.com where most people there, I think, of the opinion that it's overpriced junk. I'm not entirely. I don't hate it as much as everybody else does. It certainly has its fair share of flaws, some of which will never be able to be fixed. Some of which they've dealt with a recent firmware update, which I'll talk about a bit more in a bit. The main issues with this is, whilst the unit itself is of a pretty high quality, it was clearly something else made to be an official SNK Neo Geo emulator. The build quality of the device is nice. It has a pretty decent sort of, although far too clicky for my liking, and by clicky I mean actually loud, clicky joypad. If this was the motion and the clickiness of it is okay, but it's the volume of those clicks that's actually upsetting. You can't honestly play this with anybody else sitting in the room because it'll drive into distraction, which sort of limits its appeal somewhat. The other buttons are okay. The major issue for me is the screen. The screen's not a particularly good quality one. It's a bit sort of greyed out, and the, I don't know, after looking at something like the PlayStation Vita or even the 3DS, it's not great. But also it's 16 by 9. All Neo Geo games are 4 by 3. So by default this stretches the image out, giving all the characters that sort of short, squat look, and sort of a bit fat and stretched. There is an option within the game to I think it's this L2 button or L1 button here, which snaps it back into the 4x3 mode, which is obviously, I guess, where most people want to play it. But then you have, you know, fairly big borders on either end, so you're sort of wasting the screen real estate. I would rather they put in a smaller, better quality screen and actually made the whole thing a bit sort of narrower. But I'm guessing these screens are cheaper and easier to come by than any sort of 4x3 screens these days. The game, the system came pre-bundled with a whole bunch of different games. Nothing overly remarkable. In fact, if I switch this on, I can walk you through what they were. Some of the issues, while we wait for this to boot up, I'll move on to other areas of the system. The original idea, what's interesting about the system is, whilst it's primarily a handheld, it came with this, which, if you don't know, is based on the original Neo Geo AES, which was the home console version of the Neo Geo MVS, which was the arcade counterpart of the system. The AES and MVS were interesting systems. The MVS was incredibly successful in the arcades. I believe it was the longest running platform ever. I'm sure somebody will turn around and say something like the PC is a longer running platform, but in terms of arcade systems, I think this was a standard that just went on and on and on. And there was some cool interoperability between the home system and the arcade one. There were memory cards that came for the home system, and you could plug directly into the arcade and transfer your save games from home to the arcade. I never had an AES system where I was growing up. They were always way too expensive, and still to this day they command a hefty price. It's just not a market I can afford to play in. a lot of these games go for £400, £500, £600 per game, when exact replicas of the same games can be found on other systems for £2 or £3. I just can't justify that cost. It's just not worth it to me. But if it is to you, don't let me get in your way. Anyway, so this is the closest I'll probably ever come to an AES. I have a Neo Geo CD and an MVS arcade system, which will do me just fine. Anyway, this is actually nothing really. It's a glorified docking station. There are some connectors at the back for HDMI and power, and then a horrible AV out, which is just a regular headphone jack. So you've got your stereo audio and video, composite video, coming straight out of that jack. So as you can imagine, it's not the best quality. If you pop this open in the front here, which is not a particularly nice or satisfying mechanism here, you can see inside that there's a sort of marking where the system itself goes. This is sort of a felty sort of feeling substance, so it's hopefully not going to scratch your system. The device itself, they do tell you to switch it off before you plug it in, so I'll do that. You've got to align it with the headphone input and the sort of mini HDMI input, and kind of force it in there. It's probably more of a two-hand job, but you'll forgive me for doing this while I'm holding the camera. Anyway, so once that's in there, you can shut this down, plug in your cables in the back, and turn it on here, and then that'll run through either a composite video connection or HDMI, both of which have their issues. Composite is really bad. As I said, it's not coming from a great source, and there's nothing you can do about that source because it's coming straight out of the system in that way. So, you know, the Neo Geo AES and CD both can be RGB modded, which will give fantastic pictures on decent CRT TVs. This cannot, so it'll never be able to compete with those. HDMI is a bit of a mixed bag. Typically when you're using HDMI, you're going to be running it through a large screen TV, probably 32 to 50 to 60 inches, and when you're blowing up a standard definition image onto those types of TVs, they tend to look pretty poor. They're either stretched to 16 by 9, or if you manually set them to display in 4 by 3, the image is better, but the sort of processing that your TV is trying to do onto the image will end up making them look a bit blurry, and they just really look bad. It's difficult for me to describe it. There are some things that you can do. You can run them through things like the XRGB and then a scanline generator to try and improve the image or upscale them a bit. But I actually find well, those things are hugely expensive, so most people won't do it. And yeah, it's still it's not an ideal solution. Anyway, so apart from this cheap system, there's another nice bit about this. I'll just quickly pop that on, and that was that it came with the what they claim was a perfect replica of the original AES joystick. Now, I've never really played on an original AES joystick. I've had a sort of wobble on one and pushed a couple of buttons, but the one I saw was pretty tired and had seen better days, so it's not fair for me to compare this with that. I would say just from feel, this plastic feels cheaper than I remember that one being, and the joysticks, they're not bad. I've used much worse joysticks than these. I know some sort of bigger Neo Geo fans than I am have actually gone in and replaced these with original sort of Sunma parts or maybe Sunitsu parts, and they prefer it. I may go down that route in the end, but for now this is perfectly good for my needs. Another nice thing about this is it has a regular old USB connector, so it'll work perfectly straight into your PC or Mac, or on your PS3. In fact, I downloaded some of the Neo Geo Station games and played them with this on the PlayStation 3, which is one of the best ways to legally play Neo Geo games on your big screen TV. Certainly better than via this contraption. Anyway, so as I've mentioned, there were a couple of issues with this system. the main ones being the sound quality. This is basically an Android device which plays Neo Geo ROMs through an emulator, and that emulator wasn't particularly well configured initially, so there was an issue with the frequency that the sounds were being played at. There was some issues with this menu. Sometimes you'd push right and it would flip over 2 or 3 games, so you'd have to sort of go 2 across and then 1 back to try and get to the game you actually wanted to play. And in order to get around that, they've released a firmware update. That firmware update is not free. It's not like your iPhone or any modern piece of software where you just run an update through the system and you get the latest version for free. Nope. To get the update, you have to buy this little treasure here, which is the brilliantly named Neo Geo X Mega Pack Volume 1. This contains a number of the better games. Certainly, I would say on average all of these games are better than most of the games that came with the original, with a few exceptions. These were by and large early versions of games. A lot of them forgettable. Obviously you've got Metal Slug, which is great. Magician Lords, which is a classic, but I can live without Baseball Stars. Or early versions of King of Fighters. I do like Samurai Shodown 2 a whole lot. Anyway, so in this package, which is made to look a lot like the original AES boxes, something I've never owned, you get Art of Fighting 3, Blazing Star, Blues Journey, Garo Mark of the Wolves, King of Fighters 96, Kazuna Encounter, which you may or may not know. The original AES version of this, I think the European version goes for crazy money. I'm talking thousands of pounds. I'm not really sure why anybody would pay that kind of money for it, because it's readily available in other formats, and it's not even that great a game. But I guess collectors, being what they are, gotta catch them all. So that's why this commands a lot of money, because it was only made in tiny quantities, if at all. Then we got The Last Blade, Metal Slug 2, Samurai Shodown 3, Savage Rain, Sengoku, Shock Troopers, Super Sidekicks 3, Top Hunter, and World Heroes 2 Jet. Now all of these are sort of, unlike what came on the original selection, usually not the first versions of each game. They sort of further along down the line, so they're the more polished versions. But in some cases not the definitive versions of those games. I personally would have rather had Samurai Shodown 4 or Samurai Shodown 5 Special than Samurai Shodown 3. Equally, I would have rather had one of the later versions of Sengoku, and same for Metal Slug. Even better, I would have rather had series-specific collections rather than these sort of mega packs. I would have much rather gone out and bought the Metal Slug collection or the Last Blade collection, or even maybe like a shooter collection where they had Blazing Lasers and Last Resort and Aero Fighter 2 and 3 all on one card, rather than the sort of hodgepodge of games where, you know, by and large, I'm only that interested in a handful of them, but I guess that is the nature of compilations. Anyway, so what's special about this package is what comes in it. I mentioned earlier that there is a firmware update, and so when you look at this, it's a bit of an unboxing video for you. So this is your instruction manual. You've got to go through a bit of a process in order to get the firmware update installed first, because the game actually requires the firmware update to be installed in order to work correctly. It comes with this rather nice manual, which, to be honest, is probably the most expensive thing in this package. It's nicely printed. It has that sort of freshly printed smell to it. Each page has the original cover image, as well as a sort of screenshot and sort of details on the manufacturer, when it came out, how big the original cartridge was, and a sort of blurb about the game itself. I'm not crazy about the choice of font or how close they had it to the sort of edge. You really have to twist the manual apart in order to read it, and I'm sure that's not doing it any favours. It would be nice if they used a smaller font and maybe brought everything in a bit. Maybe I'm just being picky. At the back they've got stickers for each of the games. It's basically just the logo or title screen, which is a nice touch, and then finally they have some system specific ones. So you've got the big Neo Geo logo there and the Neo Geo X one. That's nice, nice touch. Didn't have to do it and they did anyway. This bit here is actually, although I'll never use it for this, it's shaped so you can store your Neo Geo in there. It's a nice idea because there currently isn't a travel case or anything for this, which is something I really wish they would bring out. I know some people have been using PSP cases because it's kind of the same sort of shape. Maybe I'll look into that down the line. And then, of course, you have the rocket cable. The rocket cable is a bit of a multifunctional device. As you can see here, you've got C and X selectors. When it's set to C, it'll just do straight charge. When it's set to X, that's to do the actual firmware update. You also need to obviously plug in the AC adapter, which used to plug into here, straight into here, in order to do either the firmware update or to do the charging. But the nice thing about this is it removes the need for this, which, as you can tell, is kind of a dumb thing, because if you're going to take this on a holiday with you, kind of means this thing isn't particularly portable. Thanks to this, it's a little bit more portable, although I personally would have preferred a solution where it was just straight sort of USB to another USB, so I could charge this off my laptop or any sort of USB wall charger adapter. Anyway, nice to have this, nice to have the firmware updated. You also have a copy of, which is an SD card, with the Neo Geo logo on the back there, and this contains all of the new games. This creates a bit of a problem in a way, because whilst the vast majority of the original games for this, I got the limited edition, which seems to be the only edition of it which is available, which comes with a game called Ninja Masters, which is actually a pretty decent fighting game. Now, the problem with this is, what I'm ultimately going to land up doing is popping this out and leaving this full-time in the Neo Geo X, unless they ultimately bring out a new Mega Pack, which I doubt. But you know, once this is in, it means I can't play Neo Masters. It would be nice. Sorry, not Neo Masters, Ninja Masters. It would be nice had they just throwing this on as an optional extra, you know, as a freebie onto the Mega Pack, just for those that did have it, because, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to carry around a spare SD card because I'm going to lose it. This also doesn't have a case of its own, so it's almost guaranteed to get lost or whatever on our travels. Anyway, so so they fixed the sound quality in this. They've improved the menu. They've actually replaced all of these images. The original ones were pretty ugly. These are, believe it or not, quite a bit better, going just for the logos themselves. If we go all the way across to here and push, and that will go into the new games. I'll load up Garo just so you can see. This one actually takes, oops, wrong button. Garo takes the longest to load because it's the largest game on the system. It takes a good, I don't know, 10-20 seconds maybe. It certainly feels that way to load, but once it's up and running, it's fine. You can see it's saved my settings to keep this in 4:3 rather than 16:9, which is one of the major features of this firmware update. You can see if I push this button, it'll flip out to 16:9, which is definitely a suboptimal way of playing these games, as I mentioned previously. I'll pop that back. The sound's a lot better. I would actually say the emulation, and I'm certainly no expert, but to my untrained eyes is almost perfect now. Yeah, so yes, I think this Mega Pack it sort of makes this it sort of justifies the expense of this. I was left kind of regretting purchasing this initially. I wasn't overwhelmed with the games, but to be fair, I knew what they were before I bought them, and then the sort of average at best emulation quality combined with the not brilliant image quality sort of made me feel a bit hard done by it. It wasn't hugely expensive, but you know, it was about the price of a 3DS, and there's no debating. The 3DS is a much better system than this, with better games and better hardware. This sort of seemed like a rush job, which you know, I don't know. I think the Neo Geo deserved better. It's nice to see that they've released a firmware and addressed some of the issues. Some of the issues I'd still like them to sort out is maybe when you're outputting the image out of here, maybe put in some artificial scan lines to help improve the way the image looks on a more modern TV, and also give you the option to switch between different BIOSes and system types with this. If you don't know, the Neo Geo games often in Europe and America were censored compared to their Japanese counterparts. So you would, you know, chop people in half and sweat or some other brown or white or grey liquid would come out of them rather than sort of red blood, which has always been a bit lame. There are also the AES versions were all limited to having 4 credits, which, when you know you're spending hundreds of pounds or dollars on a single game and you're only likely to have, let's say, 5 games ever on the system, is okay. But you know, when you've got 30 of them and some of them are largely forgettable, and maybe you just want to plow through them over a weekend with a friend over some beers, it's a bit frustrating to be limited to a set number of credits. It would be nice to have the arcade versions where you could just, you know, use one of these many superfluous buttons up here to just pump it full of credits. Hopefully that'll come in the future. I'm not going to hold my breath because, well, you know, I don't know how well this thing is selling, and I think this may be the last Mega Pack we get. But yeah, so there you go. Overall, a decent little system. It certainly has its flaws. It's difficult to recommend because there are many ways of playing these games these days, some legal, some not. This is definitely the most, well, not the most legal way, but the current a legal way of doing it. The other way is the PlayStation Neo Station on the PlayStation 3 and PSP. I like that. I like the emulation. I like some of the options. What I don't like is the fact that you have to buy it twice. So if I wanted Metal Slug on the PSP as well as my PlayStation 3, I'd have to buy both versions. They're pretty expensive, but the emulation is good. It also only seems to be the older sort of first generation of games, similar to what came preloaded on this originally. None of the games on this Mega Pack are currently available, and they haven't released any new ones for probably well over a year, if not 2, so I'm guessing there's not going to be many more of those. Yeah, so not an essential purchase. If you've got some money burning a hole in your pocket and you're cheating for some Neo Geo, consider getting this. There is another option which I'll probably do in my next video, or certainly one of the second ones, is actually using the Ouya, which has a very good Neo Geo emulator. Obviously that's of questionable legality if you don't own the original hardware. I actually happen to own the MVS cartridges and or Neo Geo CD copies of most of those games, so I don't lose any sleep at night over having emulated versions of it on my Ouya, but we'll deal with that in another video. Thanks for bearing with me through all of this. I hope it wasn't too dull. In the future, hopefully I'll have some video capture devices, so I'll be able to show you how this looks, at least running through HDMI, if not through composites. Yeah, thanks. I hope you enjoyed this. Looking forward to your comments. It wasn't too bad. Thanks again.